Well, welcome to the first installment of Vancouver Real Estate Live. And I'm here with Matt. And obviously, we've got the managing broker at William Wright Commercial, Mr. Corey Wright. Thanks for joining us, Corey.
Thanks for having me back.
And we wanted to start by just mentioning we are talking about weed and beer tonight. And we have an amazing sponsor, East Van Brewery.
Well,
has
not so much a sponsor as a brewery that gave us beer.
I'm calling it a sponsor. Okay. It's a sponsor.
We're sponsored.
It's a huge sponsor.
We saved $16.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for joining us, and we appreciate you tuning in. And we're talking to Corey tonight actually about beer and weed.
Good topics.
Good topics.
Welcome to
And
Vancouver.
yeah, exactly. And actually, we're talking about the microbrewery industry and also the big weed new stores that are coming to Vancouver, obviously, to buy pot, and how that impacts your investment and also the areas that you may be considering. So maybe, Matt, how do you want to start?
How I want to start is, I think anybody watching this probably knows Adam and myself as the co-hosts of the Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. We're not exactly interesting, but our man Corey here is.
Can you
tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Corey Wright. I'm the managing broker of William Wright Commercial Real Estate Services, and we have 3 Lower Mainland offices, Vancouver, New West, and Langley. And like we talked about last time, we're going to Victoria. So February 1st.
Fantastic.
Open, ready to go over there. So it'll be our 4th office, and hopefully we have the same.
Where is your office in Victoria?
We have a temporary office space on Yates Street that we're taking over for about a year, and then we've purchased real estate on Johnson Street, which is sort of a major developing corridor over there.
Right.
Which will hopefully be in, fingers crossed, end of 2020, early 2021, which will be our new permanent Victoria showroom office.
Nice.
And the amazing thing about you, Corey, before we go any further, was you were at where were you at? Prompton.
Before.
How long ago was that?
We just entered our 7th fiscal year, so it'd probably been about 8 years ago.
So
Right.
you went from
City of Prompton.
a commercial broker at Prompton
Yeah.
to just what you said, 3 stores moving into different cities,
Yeah.
or 3 brokerages. It's kind of an incredible thing to do in 7 years, and I can say that because it's amazing to watch.
We appreciate it.
It's
Well,
a-
I think the thing too is in our business, right? Like it's not rocket science. It's hard work, but I think it's treating people the way they want to be treated. You know, answering your phone, calling them back, make sure you know what you're doing, and just take care of people in the process. It's so much easier for us to retain, great staff members by taking care of them, and that
Right.
same applies to clients. And you do good for one, they tell one person, and you piss somebody off, they tell 14, 15, 20, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Sure.
we work really hard to make sure that aftermarket services there, client parties, Christmas stuff, all that stuff, all year round for them. That way, hopefully, we sort of just grow organically.
Perfect.
Right. So we put this out to the podcast.
We
You
did.
know, we said, okay, we have a live show coming up, topic to be announced. Talked to some people who listened. They had a couple of ideas about where we should go with this.
Right.
And the first, what would you say, the most overwhelming question?
The most overwhelming question, and it might say more about our listeners, but people want to know the best investments out there right now in the city of Vancouver or Greater Vancouver under $1 million. So, I mean, we have a lot of like kind of ma and pa type investors.
This is the thing. So I was going to say, investors, let's keep it to under $1 million.
Yeah.
Right.
The cheaper, the better. People, let's think, if you were somebody in Vancouver with another job, a family, you don't have time to potentially rehab or the desire to do that stuff,
Sure.
and you were looking this fall, 2019, what would you buy? Corey.
Corey, commercial.
Going to the Fraser
Commercial.
Valley, going to the Fraser Valley to buy small bay industrial. By far, I think one thing too is you get, in commercial, you get like on the lower end of the purchasing scale, more like the first time investors or something like that into it. I mean, owning commercial and owning commercial buildings can sometimes be a job, and not everyone knows how to do it. So if you go buy something in a small bay industrial where you have extremely high demand on the leasing side, right now you're watching industrial lands get swallowed up under OCPs for development.
Right.
And the zonings are becoming more flexible, which is giving it much more opportunity for your tenant pool to grow. And they're very, very minimal work required from a landlord.
And can you talk a little bit for anyone listening, what that actually means? Small bay.
Small bay industrial, typically we're talking about anything under about 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet. Industrial, usually you have sort of offices upstairs and you have showroom entry points, small offices, warehouse at the back.
Right.
You have loading doors on grade, so you're not dealing with big semi-trucks. And the purchasing point coming into them, you can find them probably in the Fraser Valley, 400,000 to 600,000 probably as a decent entry point.
It's like a 1-bedroom condo, bachelor unit, 1-bedroom condo in Vancouver.
They're obviously, they're not cheap, but they're not expensive in the scale of commercial real estate. And when you get into them, if you're buying a retail unit and you're buying something in a new construction project, which a lot of first-time investors buy into, you're dealing with tenant build-outs, tenant improvement allowances.
Right.
All of this stuff that maybe you just don't understand or don't have time for, versus if you go into a sort of an industrial tilt-up unit type of thing, people are leasing those more based on space and access points and arteries to get to airports or ports and stuff like that, more so than something on Robson that's surviving by walk-by traffic, which is much more landlord intensive when you're talking about work you have to put in.
And who's the typical tenant now for industrial?
Well, if you go back 10 years ago, everyone thinks that industrial might have been these like 100,000, 20,000, 30,000 square foot warehouses with semi-trucks backing up. And you look at now, builders are, developers are building them down to 1,500, sometimes 2,000 square feet. And the zoning's become so much more flexible. The tenant pool to draw from is huge. And sometimes if you go into areas of Richmond, some of the zonings there for small bay industrial actually allow for like law offices and we've seen accounting offices in them. So the tenant pool is becoming very, very large to draw from. The lease rates are very attractive. You might be leasing industrial for 10 to 20 bucks a foot on the base rent side of things. Versus you might be paying, $40 to sometimes $50 a foot now to get stuff downtown Vancouver for office space. So you have office tenants looking at it, you have small computer companies look at it, you have tech companies that look at it. And so the tenant pool has grown immensely over the past 10 years, but the supply available to tenant has shrunk dramatically. So that's creating a perfect storm from a sort of a landlord perspective.
And why the Fraser Valley? Like you've mentioned a couple of things there that seem to suggest why the Fraser Valley's
I think,
the place to look.
Price point. You might look at a small bay industrial maybe on East Kent Avenue in Vancouver, and you're probably around the $1 million price point for 2,000 to 2,300 square feet. That same product out in Abbotsford might run you 5 or 6. And if you look at kind of people are getting pushed out to the Fraser Valley area, whether they want to or not, purely based on cost. So when we watch developers that are buying up land out there for townhouse developments and wood frame builds, you're seeing, that's going to slowly bring population in. Population will create jobs.
Right.
And you look at all these industrial units that are affordable now that have very flexible zonings that make them very attractive for a lot of small business owners to tenant. These people moving out to Langley, even Abbotsford, have huge opportunity in the employment side of things with these small bay industrials coming to market. You also see a lot of the major industrial builders buying into these Fraser Valley markets now that maybe once weren't considered 5, 6, 10 years ago.
Would you buy pre-sale or would you buy something that's already built?
I personally would probably buy pre-sale if I was buying something brand new, just because that way I'm obviously in the business, so I kind of like that opportunity of leasing it out and having more say in who my tenant is. I don't think there's anything bad with buying something that's maybe a bit older and tenanted, especially if you're looking to buy for an investment. Banks will look at them completely different if they're tenanted versus if they're vacant.
Right.
If they're vacant, it's going to rely very heavily on the creditability and debt servicing ability of the purchaser versus if there's a lease in place or a long-term lease in place, the bank can then look at some of that income to kind of offset that debt ratio.
And on the commercial side, pre-sale does that basically work the same as residential?
Very similar. In commercial, you don't have disclosure statements and stuff like that, like you do in there is a little more knowledge maybe behind it. You don't have as much protection as say if you're buying like a condo type of thing. Definitely want to know who the developers are. Like you want to make sure you do your research so you know what you're buying.
And what about deposit structure? Is it the same kind of 15, 20%?
It could be 10, 15, 20%, all depending on probably market conditions and also depending on probably the stage they're at. The closer they are to completion, the more aggressive you can maybe be on your deposit because the risk for the developers is gone. If you're buying in early, there's certain quotas they have to meet sales-wise probably to have financing kick in. So they're putting a lot more pressure to get that done.
Interesting. Matt, where are you investing?
East Van Brewery.
I was gonna say this
Kickstarter Pale Ale.
This looks like a display, but it's really just a lineup of beer that I'm going through.
Yeah, and you better ask me where I'm investing because within 10 minutes I'll be incoherent.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Corey, you're not drinking. You maybe drove here.
I did. Yeah, I gotta make a trek back to Coquitlam after this. So.
I brought Matt in a wheelbarrow. So
if it was big enough, I'd jump in on the way home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So Matt, where are you thinking?
Also, just as an aside. We should have done this at the start.
Right.
We're live at the Bento Box.
Oh, yeah, we are live at the Bento Box.
This place is.
And Ramey's dancing. Nice.
Yeah.
We're at the bento box. We got the really nice display here. A lot of
Unbelievable
cacti.
sunset today.
Yeah.
You couldn't have picked a better day.
Oh yeah.
Actually, Ramey, can you see it?
We could earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So where am I investing? I kind of keep it back. Went back to the basics on this, and I've been talking to a lot of people about downtown 1-bedroom condos.
Wow.
Yeah. So nothing exciting here. The logic is this. There's a few things. One, off of the top price, you're somewhere between 7 to 10% down since, say, the end of 2017. Rents have not come down.
Yeah.
I would argue that they've weathered the storm quite well, though. Like, I actually just looked in Yaletown Park, and I just pulled up the stats over the last 3 months. Stuff's selling within 20 days. I also pulled up the stats or the sales from 2017, same last 3 months. Stuff was selling in 17 days. So we're really, it's kind of weathered the storm really well. It's liquid. In terms of real estate, you're pretty close to being liquid quickly. I would focus on something downtown, 1-bedroom, newer than 2000, large strata, parking, outdoor space, and you're gonna have a lineup of renters. You're gonna get good rent. Cash flows maybe another question, but those, I think right now we're at the low. I think we're coming out the other side, and there's a lot of upswing there.
I've been seeing like bachelor units in good buildings, high 400s, low 500s that will rent for like $1,850 a month, $1,800.
Wow.
So
Here's
not bad for our. we're
Yeah.
different when it comes
Can I
to
throw,
cap
can I throw
rate.
some support behind that? So
Yeah,
I think
sure.
if you look
Please.
at sort of like from a commercial aspect on that, Vancouver, obviously it's landlocked. You got roughly about 4.4, 4.6 million square feet of office space under construction now or being delivered shortly that over the next 2 or 3 years. Amazon is one of the major drivers of the tenants coming in. I think they'll have around 750, 800,000 square feet after the post building is done.
Yeah.
These are young professionals with disposable income that want to live that downtown lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I don't think yet to see a city that Amazon's come in or tech's come in and dominated and had a market collapse on it.
I hate to say, I hate to say it, but Spectrum is like anyone who knows Spectrum out there is kind of IKEA condos.
Yeah.
Concord Pacific's bronze product.
Yeah.
But man,
That's a nice.
that's putting it nice. Yeah.
2 elevators
Weird.
for 40
They're
Weird
fake bronze.
euphemism, yeah.
You know what the thing is?
there's
we
a
got a
question.
question.
Oh my God!
Hey,
Somebody's
secret.
listening.
Yeah.
Secret.
This,
Shout it
this
out.
could be my mom, guys.
And
Hold on a
thanks for
second.
wearing your best black shirt. What?
We had a like from Anderson, a thumbs up. I wanted to mention that.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Anderson.
Thank you, Anderson.
And we have a question from Kim. I am a first-time home buyer, and I saw a place I fell in love with over the weekend. It has no rentals allowed. I am torn. Friends are telling me not to buy it, but what should I do?
Matt, you want to take that?
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting question, and I'd be interested to hear what everybody. I think Adam and I are on the same page with this one. Sorry,
it's
Chris.
rent-
There was
it's
no.
rental
There
res-
was no rentals.
Yes, it has no rentals allowed. Friends are telling me not to buy it. What should I do?
I would say don't buy that place.
Really?
I
That's
would
bold.
say don't buy that.
I would base it on your goals. It depends what your goals are. So if you're planning on living there and depends how old you are, Kim. I would if you're, maybe at the twilight years.
No. First time home buyer. Well,
Oh.
she could be old, but
Hey Matt, you never know. She could be at retirement age and she might love the place and she doesn't have any plans on renting it out. But I'd like to hear your logic.
Okay, so why I'm saying don't buy that place is, things could change, right? Stratas change bylaws all the time. The province potentially is going to change the ability to have no rentals allowed.
Right, to get more inventory on the market.
Exactly. But the logic here is we have seen a lot of people move through this market and never sell a property, right? And we have actually a podcast coming out tonight all about using the equity in your home to
The
either
Smith maneuver.
invest, the Smith maneuver,
Right.
either invest or move through the market and leave a trail of properties behind that eventually are going to cash flow, put some green in your jeans.
Right.
So the logic here is if you buy something that doesn't allow rentals, I've totally lost my train of thought.
No,
here. I gotta
if
stop
you buy
drinking
something
this
that
beer.
doesn't allow rentals, then if you want to refinance and buy your next property and keep this property as a revenue property, you don't have that ability, right?
And if the market's not, I mean, you want the ability to hold the property in a down market, right? If you don't need to sell it, you don't have to. And with no rentals, you're really beholden to, say, if it's a one bedroom, you're in that one bedroom, and if you want to leave, you're selling that property, whether the market's good, the market's bad. The ability to keep it as an investment is not there. My experience, and I'd be curious, well, maybe not with you so much, Corey, but my experience with first-time home buyers is that often people think in terms of forever homes, right? I love this place. I love this kitchen. I can imagine me and my friends sitting here. Your life circumstances change.
Sure.
But you can change a kitchen. You can't change a rental restriction.
Right. And I think the other thing is if you are living there for a few years and the market shifts and you're not in a position where you want to sell because we're in a tough market and you still have to move, either you're expanding your family or death, divorce, relocation, all those things that drive people, you can't sell, and then you're in a situation where you can't hold either, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Does the type of product make the difference versus a condo, say like a townhouse? Would that influence your decision?
Well, that's a good question.
Is the townhouse becoming the new house, where that's where?
I think the townhouse is becoming, in a lot of ways, the new house, especially since we didn't see much of a bottom in detached. I mean, it's crazy. I feel like houses now, even last month, seems like we're bouncing back in the detached market in this way, where I think a lot of people were kind of hoping that we'd get to that sub $1 million price point again in East Vancouver, at least. But I think a lot of people, the big question is, if you're going to buy something in the entry-level detached market, you're still looking at probably 1.2, 1.3, and it's going to be a pretty rough house.
For sure.
So, and you're going to have to it could potentially be a money pit. So I think a lot of people would rather have a turnkey option in the townhouse at, $1 million or 1.1 or 1.2. In terms of rental restrictions, though.
But there's not, well, usually you don't see as many rental restrictions. And in my mind, along those lines, if the townhome is the new single family, I was just talking to somebody the other day about this. Like a townhome downtown as a rental property is a phenomenal rental property for a few reasons. One, it appeals to families. They're not building a lot of townhomes downtown, right? Like the idea, this is in part why I was saying, hey, it's not rocket science, stay downtown.
Yeah.
There's a peninsula, it's landlocked, there's not a lot of land to develop. The land that's being developed is being, the prices are what, $2,000 a foot, whatever. It's all high-end luxury supply. Yeah. So those townhomes in places like downtown, I think that's a phenomenal rental property.
I think they're so rare to find too, right?
Right.
It's just like you can't. I think 10 years ago, you look at a townhouse, people are thinking about security issues, and no one wants to be there. And now, based on pricing, that these things are, and I think up here, you've got. There's the talent pool to draw from an employment standpoint. You got all the biggest companies in the world in the tech industry coming in, and then you got these young professionals that are getting paid six figures that have disposable income that can afford to pay $2,000-$3,000 a month for rent and go out there and eat 3 or 4 times a week, right? So that's why I think what you said is bang on. You mean it's probably gone through turbulence now, but look at San Francisco as a marketplace, right? Like we've mirrored that a lot in the commercial world. And with their tech tenants coming up, like look at the housing market in San Francisco. Right. We look at the office market down there, like at $50 a foot for some AAA office buildings in Vancouver. People scratch their head and they can't believe it. But you look in San Francisco, you're paying sometimes over $80 a foot for the same product. Right. And it's the same tenant base that we're drawing from.
Right. And that's wow. So $80 a square foot down to, and that would be like to the Amazons potentially.
It'd be probably the better buildings down there.
Yeah.
But again, like it's the tech market down there, right? These are companies that have enormous balance sheets, lots and lots of money, and they can afford to pay these rents, and they're coming in. And that's when in Vancouver, there's so much office under construction right now. But a lot of the tenants coming in are WeWorks, which the news that came out. This past week, they may not be the brightest thing to have as a tenant right now, but like with the WeWork spaces, they're not coming in taking up 10,000 square feet. They're taking up hundreds of thousands of square feet. The Apples, the Amazons. So, these are all the younger generation that will be paid six figures in their early 20s that can afford to rent these condos.
And just to build on that, right? I've had a couple people buy in Olympic Village lately, and you got Sony, you got Hootsuite.
Yeah.
That is actually the 1-bedroom market in Olympic Village, as I understand, according to the property managers we work with, is the hottest market in Vancouver. When you think of Amazon and the post office transformation, I'm going back to my pitch.
Yeah.
Downtown,
Well, I'm buying
Yale
one after
Town.
this talk anyway. So
Something like Yale Town Park you can't lose. And here's the other thing. Like I said, I drew the last 3 months of sales, and in 2017,
You brought data?
I brought data. I'm not gonna actually look at it.
I thought we were having a beer.
But here's the thing. The price point on the larger 1-beds has come down a bit. You know what stayed the same? The cheapest is there's a bottom on, when stuff's getting snapped up. Sure. $529. In 2017, the cheapest thing to sell was a studio at $529.
wow.
Cheapest thing in the last 3 months, a studio for $529.
Wait a second. That's not true, though. That's,
No, in Yale Town Park.
Oh, in Yale Town Park. Okay.
So my point is that when I say cheap and cheerful, the stuff that weathers these downturns best, where if you're worried about losing money, get in at that entry level.
Isn't the number one rule of real estate location? So if you buy a good location, you'll always sort of weather that storm.
Totally.
Much better than if you cheap out, I guess, and maybe buy based on price.
I feel like in my thinking, I've evolved to having something that you can easily, like something liquid, right? And something in a great location. I mean, at the end of the day, especially if you're a buy and hold investor, you want to have something like it. It's just great to own premium product, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere.
There's so much of it out there, right?
Well, that's it for sure.
So much waterfront you can get.
You got your.
I got my stats.
Yeah.
Average time on market, 2019, last 3 months, 20 days.
Wow.
Average time on market, 2018. And that's in the fall of 2018, it was brutal. 16 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
2017, 14 days. So, if you want something that you can move.
Sure.
But what would you buy? Because you're not, I know for a fact, I just told you what I was buying, and I knew you were going out looking for something else.
I feel like I didn't prep like you guys did, but I'm going to go with Strathcona Village, which I think was a fantastic buy when we pre-sold it, I don't know, 5 years ago, call it.
2013.
2013, maybe 6 years ago. I remember there was the 1-beds were like mid 200s, the 2-beds were like, I think we're starting around low 4s or It was
so this say where the building is.
Everybody doubled their money. So it's over on Hastings at like Raymer basically. So you're kind of in Strathcona. You're teetering. You're kind of close to the Hastings corridor and like Hastings Sunrise. Building completed in 2017. I think it was 2017. Wall Financial. It's investor grade product, but it's like really, really durable stuff. Like they've got the vinyl floors. Like it's built actually to last.
It's built to appeal to investors. I think
it's built to appeal to investors, and for sure. And there's a lot of units. There's a lot of different unit types, but a lot of 1-beds, small 1-beds, and small 2-beds. And the actual cap rates in that building, like so, you can buy right now. Low to mid 400s, you can buy 1-beds that will rent for like $1,800 a month.
Wow.
You can buy 2-beds that for low to mid 600s that will rent for like $2,500.
Wow, that much.
So I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. And then the flip side of that is that Ani is developing just down the street at Clark and Hastings.
Yep.
Where the yoke,
yoke space there.
Yeah. So they're developing there, and I can't imagine just with like build costs.
There's a couple other developers that have acquired quite a bit of
Reliance. Reliance is building over there.
Corridor.
Yeah.
Chip Wilson owns a bunch of stuff over there.
So to go back to the wall development there, I'm gonna add another 10% equity in everyone's property, and I can't disclose the name.
Oh.
But the pizza place that we ordered from before this is potentially going into one of the retail units there.
Really?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
you're gonna be able to push the button and get pizza right up to your.
Well, there's a wine bar that
bar
just
there, yeah.
opened.
that
up
is
at the
unbelievable.
base.
The wine bar is
Yeah, there's a wine bar
exciting
in there.
news.
So this is a major.
I'm just
Bob
thinking
likes
though,
Thai food. Bob likes Thai food. I've never actually tried that Thai food.
It's pretty good Thai food. Here's the thing though, $800 to $850 a foot at Strathcona Village, and there's no way Ani finished product, new product, they can't sell it less than what? 1,100. I don't know. It depends with the market, but $1,000 a foot.
They're
Tough
not
to
going
say,
below
but I'm just saying.
1,000,
I'm just thinking with build costs at
Gilmore,
that
they're
site.
at 900.
You know, and this is the same pricing right now as I ran the numbers. It's comparable rent. It's the same pricing as New West's at River Sky.
Yeah.
And it's the same rent basically. So you can own in New West on the SkyTrain line, or you can own at Strathcona Village. I mean, I'd probably pick Strathcona Village.
And the way that I always think about it is Hastings Wall was basically the first one to take a flyer on it. I mean, the writing's on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Developers own all that long,
Yeah,
all the land
all the
along
way
there.
up Sunrise. You have Anthem, Reliance.
Yeah,
I think Port Living, I believe. You know, I mean, every major player is in and around those corridors. So it's only a matter of time before those areas are going to sort of gentrify.
And of course,
themselves
like I just
rapidly.
helped somebody buy in Strathcona Village actually 2 months ago, say, and she loved it. She loved the area. She loved everything about it. So it wasn't a hard sell. But one of the things I was saying was, imagine once these retail spaces are in here. Imagine once the Ani building's complete, like just the foot traffic and how that creates the amenities, right? It's like
Totally, 100%.
it's not that hard to see an entire community emerge within 6 years.
Well, I think if you picture it, right, if you bought a condo in Yaletown in the late 90s, early 2000s, people probably thought you were absolutely crazy.
Right.
And if you have nothing to do on a Friday night and you have access to the MLS system and you go in the back there and you start seeing people buy condos at 100,000, 106,000 back then, you think the foresight these people had was phenomenal, because some of these guys retire with this stuff now. And I think when you know, in our business, we see these areas gentrify and these buildings come around. I would, hands down, no questions asked, buy in the first building that is going to go into an area and gentrify.
Yeah.
You'll have some rocky years ahead of you. You'll probably have some rent troubles. But if you're thinking 10, 15, 20 years and 20 buildings around you later, you were the first ones in, it repeats itself over and over again everywhere you look, from Cole Harbour to Yaletown to probably Langley in some parts.
Well, and here's to jump on your Strathcona Village. I would say you'd get a pretty good renter there. You're getting pretty good rent
for sure.
and a pretty good renter already. So it's rocky years are hard to. I don't even.
Well,
I don't
you're
see right
leaving-
now as a rocky period. there.
Maybe when I say rocky, maybe like Vancouver rocky, is when you might have 1 or 2 days of vacancy in the next 4 years.
Yeah,
Sure.
Right, versus what you might have had before. But I think for us, when we see these master planned communities come together and these areas gentrify, I hands down, if someone came to me and said, we're going to take this area here that no one wants to live in today, and we're going to build a tower, you just know it's going to turn into a copycat halo effect, and they're all going to slowly come around you.
Right. We were worried that we weren't going to have a lot to talk about during this hour, but that was, I think, question number 1. So did we answer Kim's question, by the way?
No, so
you know
actually we may have, because I think we kind of
You
I
talked her out
basically
of a
said
deal,
no,
and I just got a text from her realtor.
no, and then we pivoted to a couple of really good buys, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
Sure.
that's what happened there.
Rami, do we have any questions? Not at the moment. Oh, geez.
My mom
Okay,
hasn't chimed in yet. That's
well, we
why.
have questions that yeah, exactly. We have questions that were actually sent in before we went live, which basically were from the podcast. We asked people to send our questions. So I've got one, and this is actually maybe a good way to start off the microbrewery portion of the conversation.
Right.
But James says, I wouldn't buy close to a bar district. Why is there value buying at a microbrewery in a microbrewery district? So
I think the culture around them are completely different. I mean, when you just think entertainment district or bar district, I think you're thinking like Granville Street, where you got floods of 19-year-old kids out after hours and problems.
punching each other in the face.
Totally. And that's where I think when you look at the culture around these breweries, it's completely different. And they're not sort of the drinking per se culture that you might find in a bar or nightclub. It's young families that are going there. Some kids are welcome in areas. I know where we are out in Coquitlam area. When I pass by Brewers Row out there,
Keep talking.
Go on.
you literally have some Saturday mornings, you have strollers lined up like motorcycles.
Yeah.
And you got mums in there with kids having a beer after a walk, right?
Right.
Or you see, you have bikers that they'll bike around the Rocky Point area. They'll come off the Barnett Highway. Instead of going home, they all park their pedal bikes, their street bikes.
Right.
They park them there, and there's guys sitting there that are in unbelievable shape that probably just biked 50K.
Yeah.
And it's acceptable for them to go sit down and have a beer to talk about how it went. So I think the culture is completely different.
My wife is a testament to that, like parking the stroller out front crowd, because her and her friends, that's like everybody who's on maternity leave.
Yeah.
That would be a total place to meet. They'd go and have like one great pint of beer somewhere in the afternoon, and then they'd go back to their regular life.
And you
But
wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go to a bar and do that.
No,
No.
or
Right,
a,
And that's
or
when
a
the
motor
culture-
hotel.
The culture
Yeah.
is completely different, and
Yeah.
the public perception of it's completely different.
Like
Right.
almost to the point I was at a Port Moody. I stopped in. I think I said this last time we were talking about this, but I stopped in and it was like the crowd in there. There was so many families. It was almost like I was by myself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Product testing for this.
product testing, but
Exactly.
no, I was by myself. I had time before a showing, and I was like, I'll go sit in there, and it was almost like killed the mood. I was like, there's too many families.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the culture's so different,
Completely
though, right?
different now.
Yeah.
Completely different now. And
Yeah.
I think the thing too is like the evolution of how like beer was 10 years ago, where everyone would just go buy Budweiser.
Right.
Now, people want to go. They want to try these craft beers. They want to try different craft beers, right? So there's a whole marketplace that's built around these things now. That
Right.
were once dilapidated areas that probably. No
So
one
I
ever
guess
visited.
the idea then, if I understand, is when people used to think, okay, I live right by a bar.
Yeah.
It's like the idea of the bar is
Probably a negative.
a negative, right? It's out the noise, the folks that hanging around there, but this is actually a draw, as I understand.
Yeah,
it.
I think for sure. You know, what I mean, because what you're seeing communities get built around these places, right? Where they're becoming sort of an anchor point in a lot of communities. And they're coming in. You're getting these breweries and tasting rooms, and then you're also getting Starbucks open up around there. You're getting foot traffic around there. So developers, for them to flock and sort of tie that into a marketing aspect of a new condo development coming up. Look at your guys' business. Like you go to a pre-sale and they give you the nice big booklets. I'm pretty confident anything like in Lower Lonsdale or Port Moody or maybe even parts of Poco or even parts of Vancouver or East Vancouver, if there's a microbrewery around there, that's probably included in the package.
Right.
Right. There's probably a picture of people on the patio having a drink, and then there's a picture of someone walking
Yeah.
in the park. Like that's acceptable now and becomes a draw, I think, for a lot of developers. And we're watching communities get built around these things.
So this is interesting because there was another listener that had a question because we talked about this on the podcast a little bit about before it was, and I think still to some extent, follow the Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
Invest around where Starbucks, let them do the heavy lifting,
Yeah.
the big data research,
Yeah.
and follow the Starbucks. We said craft breweries are becoming like the Starbucks. Follow the
Totally.
craft breweries. And Stacy said, what did she say? Yeah, basically I just rephrased her question. Can you talk more about this phenomenon?
Well, I think the thing you look at it too, like I said, they're becoming sort of anchors in new communities, right? Like if you go to the Port Moody area, you got the row where they all are is old industrial, which probably wasn't very desirable. And now you have these 5 breweries now open up right across from Rocky Point Park that sit right onto the back of the SkyTrain and the West Coast Station. And you got small wood frame condos popping up all around this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So it's becoming an anchor point that communities are getting built around. If you look in Lower Lonsdale and North Vancouver area, there's some areas over there that probably weren't very desirable industrial that now are sort of becoming the brewery district over there, which that's going to increase foot traffic. That's going to increase walkability. All these things of these areas are going to become safer. They're not going to be sort of these dungeness corridors at nighttime. So the whole sense of community is coming around there, and that becomes like a major anchor point where you're going to see everything else sort of build around it with time.
Well,
I was going to say, what is this doing for tourism? Because my wife and I were in Portland, I think about 3 months ago. And at the time, actually, sorry, it was about 4 months ago. She was pregnant.
Yeah.
And I remember that because I was like, let's go to Rogue. Let's go. I was going to all the different beer places. And she was like, this is brutal.
driving.
Like,
she was trying.
this is the worst trip ever. But anyway,
Product
how,
knowledge is important.
how is that? How is that? Is that actually impacting Vancouver? Like when people
Yeah.
coming to Vancouver, do they think, man, I want to try the microbreweries?
Well, I think the thing, Portland's a great example.
Right.
It's almost like when you look at tourism in Portland, that is a major part of the tourism pitch for the city of Portland. And I think in Vancouver, you're looking at these areas where if you're coming from an area that probably doesn't have this, this is probably a very unique situation you're going to see.
Right.
And you might have, these breweries kind of have the halo effect where the more open up around them, they kind of cluster around each other because of zonings. It becomes, you can make a whole evening of it.
This is, and we talked about this before, but it's the amazing thing about breweries and the thing that you wouldn't guess when it comes to coffee shops too.
Yeah.
The more coffee shops in a neighborhood, it helps everyone, right? It's
Totally,
not, you don't
100%.
want to be, you want the competition.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Kelowna, right? Wine tours in Kelowna are a major part of that tourism market.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? And you look at something like Port Moody, where you might talk to someone in Vancouver that doesn't go past Burnaby, and you're talking about an area in Port Moody and they don't understand where you are, but you're like, oh, right by where all the breweries are. And they're like, oh, yeah, right by Rocky Point.
Right.
Like, they're becoming that type of thing. And I think from a tourism standpoint, like I said, people maybe are going out to Port Moody, to an area where they can literally walk every 30 feet and try 10 different beers in a completely different atmosphere. And that becomes maybe a tourism stop that people are making where maybe before they weren't going to do that.
Well, and also, I think of East Van, where you see on the weekends, usually as I'm driving to an open house, the bike tours, right?
Yeah.
These people biking from.
Yeah.
It's like the best.
It's the best thing to drive by and see people
Yeah,
having fun
it's the
on their
best
bikes.
thing to illustrate that you've made a wrong career choice when you're going to work on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's such a fun, like, that's a great thing. But
good
I
vibe.
had a kind of question for you, just thinking about, because it's always interesting to think about the changing landscape and kind of chicken and egg type situations. But have you worked with anyone, like, have you worked with people trying to find brewery locations?
They're hard to place because of zonings.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to place because of zoning. They're also very, very costly ventures to go into.
Right.
So if you're looking like North Vancouver, they've recently sort of like rezoned an area, kind of like a brewery district type of thing. And an area where maybe it was very challenging to lease old industrial now becomes a very, very hot spot where people are, these old buildings are seeing multi-million-dollar transformations around them. So we have groups. Myself personally, I've never done a brewery deal, but I know in our office we have. We've had guys look for them and stuff like that, but they are hard to place, and there's only so many spots you can kind of put them. And then, stratas are still kind of a new thing where you might see some of them in like some of the industrial areas, out in like Abbott's or Port Coquitlam.
Right.
Comes to mind where they have them inside the industrial parks. So that's still new because you got to deal with stratas and all of that stuff. So,
But like, so if it's hard to place, because East Van is known as having whatever, on a per capita basis, a lot of breweries, right? Port Moody's known for that. North Van, it seems like, is really coming up. Is it just about where they're allowed to go? Like, if it's hard to find a space, or are they kind of picturing kind of certain demographics in areas and trying to go into those communities?
well, I think it's a combination zonings, obviously.
Yeah.
There's got to be proper zonings to allow them, and
Right.
they're also very, like I said, very costly ventures to go into. So there's probably a very large tenant pool that like to enter that marketplace, but there's only so many places you can probably go, or so many places that you would probably want to go. If a zoning allows for it, the only standalone brewery in the middle of nowhere may not be as desirable versus getting into sort of a key area like in North Vancouver. I remember when years ago we used to live in North Vancouver in the Maplewood area, and a product that Anthem built. And there was a place called Bridge Brewery, I believe it was, and it was sort of a standalone type of thing.
I think I remember that
But
brewery.
but since then, there's other breweries have opened up in that Maplewood Lynn Creek corridor, right? So it's kind of like a halo effect, and everyone in that area would kind of migrate or go to that area, go to that one. I remember there was one in the Maplewood area, and in the building we own, we'd have our strata meetings at the bar.
Yeah.
Right, like it was like that's where you'd go for the strata meetings. So
Sure.
nothing would pass the first half an hour. Everything passed the last half an hour. But what I'm saying is that just goes to show you the culture.
Yeah.
You
Right.
wouldn't take a strata meeting and go to the Roxy, or you wouldn't take the strata meeting and go to a bar.
We do our strata meetings at the
You'd
Roxy.
be surprised.
But versus you'd go there where the culture is you might have one or two drinks.
Right.
You're not going there for the whole night.
Right.
And that's where you kind of get them clustering around. You can go from location to location, and make an experience of it.
One thing, I'm just thinking of developments coming up around, like Electric Avenue.
Yeah.
Strikes me as the one, and I think I haven't looked into that. That's a Panache group.
Yeah.
We had them on. That was like a year and a half ago, 2
Yeah,
years
easily.
maybe. And they launched almost at the worst
Worst
moment.
time of the market.
The
They
worst.
just broke. I drive by it every day.
Yeah.
They just broke ground.
Okay.
They're literally there's like
That's
diggers on
It
site.
was a great project, though.
That project was a fantastic project,
Yeah.
and it would have been one that
Would have blown out.
Oh my
yeah.
God! It would have
Yeah.
sold out in like
and
3
they had
days.
some rental programs too.
They had
where
some
they
great
were-
incentives.
and I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they probably now will probably find out. Oh, it was actually a successful launch, and there's
Yeah.
not a lot of product left. But that is that
It's a
to me
great
is
area.
a great area,
It's literally
great buy.
coming right off the Sutterbrook area there. Like it's a beautiful
Yeah.
area, and you literally are 200 feet from these breweries we're talking about.
I think we got a question.
We got a question. It's from Sabrina.
Okay.
What was the highlight of your talk with TransLink CEO Kevin Desmond?
Highlight from the talk of with Kevin Desmond. I'm going to say that the highlight for me was probably the City Hall station that he's most excited about. Which,
You know what I was thinking about? Well, no, go on.
Well, no, I was just going to say it seems like, to me, Fairview
Yeah.
Just with the Broadway SkyTrain coming, seems like such a no-brainer. And right around the city hall, like he was talking about the train that's basically going to go to the airport. It's going to go downtown. It's going to go to commercial platform. It's going to go as far west as the line gets eventually developed. So for me, I mean, anyone buying close to City Hall, I mean, it's expensive stuff already, but it's such a no-brainer to be close to that line because it's like a true connected line.
You can get everywhere in the city hall from there.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't need a car. You don't need to take bus.
Yeah, and if you go to the West Broadway corridor too. It's the busiest corridor we have,
Right.
Traffic-wise, right? So it's only gonna.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the thing about the City Hall areas. There just doesn't seem like there's a lot to buy. There's the spot.
The spot, yeah.
And there's some other stuff, older stuff, but there's not a lot. You'd imagine that. I mean,
Well,
I
you'd
wonder what
imagine
that
though
looks
once the community plan is released, there'll be a lot of redevelopment going on in like a lot of the older buildings, right?
Well, if you look where the liquor store is, on Cambie there, a couple blocks down.
Yeah.
I mean that's a great site there that has opportunity to be developed, and there was rumblings about that was going to be developed, and I guess the liquor, they've extended their current lease, but that is probably not too far down the road,
Right.
and stuff like that on that corridor there.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a busy spot right now. It's going to get a lot busier.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful spot. You got everything within a couple blocks. You got a liquor store. You got Home Depot. You got
Whole Foods.
Save on Foods. Whole
This
Foods.
this is past guest Kyle Green's favorite haunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Cambie Village.
It's big on.
You got that.
He's in better shape than everyone at this table, but he eats at Whole Foods a
That's
lot.
his favorite restaurant, he says.
Loves the broccoli. He's
a
big
whole
on the
chicken
broccoli.
and an avocado.
Yeah. We probably should have talked about weed first because someone out there is going to get the spins based on this order. Well, we should probably talk about weed now that we've talked
when
about
Matt
beer.
said green in your jeans earlier, I thought that was the segue. That's what I thought we're talking about.
So can we talk about big weed, and can we talk about I just maybe to get things started. We do have some listener questions, but I've actually had deals collapse because weeds was in the commercial space at the base of a strata
Elkin
building.
and Richards.
Yeah. No, but really, right?
That's the
exactly
famous
where
one.
the weeds is.
Because in the document, it literally says
They were
that you can
suing 'em.
smell weed. It's just wafts into our condo all day long, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're concerned about it in that regard. But how's big weed kind of changing the landscape?
Well, I think if we had $1 for every phone call we got for either a daycare or I want to open a pot shop, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. You guys would be hanging with me in Barbados somewhere. But it's legalized obviously now, and I think if you look at, talking about that Cambie corridor that we were just talking about, we did a deal there for the landlord for City Cannabis to go in, which I'm pretty sure it's called City Cannabis. And we have our William Wright reviews we release every month, which we try to give some level of education to sort of our followers about what's going on in the marketplace. And I think you look at liquor stores 10 years ago. Every strata bylaw said no liquor stores. Every landlord said no liquor stores. The stigma of a liquor store was drunk people hanging around, crime, people you didn't want to associate with yourself, late night bad things. 10 years later, probably most stratas, probably every mall would die to have a liquor store as an anchor.
Yeah.
If you're selling a building and there was a liquor store in the bottom of the building and you were selling it to the right demographic, that's probably a value add.
Is that a big draw for other commercial leases? If I'm a restaurant or if I'm
for a restaurant,
shop
yes, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
What about Shoppers is another anchor, I guess, but
Well, you look at these things too, right? I think the stigma around what these pot shops are, and we've done some before they became legal, and we've done I think one or maybe two since they've sort of been legal. I'm not the consumer of the product, so I don't know what makes one store's product better than the other stores. But when you look at these stores, you walk in, they're like medical grade, lick off the floor if you have to, spotless.
yeah.
And I think the stigma that circles around these stores is you're going to have guys smoking pot, eating Doritos out front.
Yeah.
You got this image in your head of what they are. And when we've done some of the stores for landlords, I've gone and met with tenants for landlords, and the door doesn't stop turning. And it's not kids in skateboards. It's
Right.
guys in suits.
Yeah.
It's older people. It's a completely different demographic. So I think getting back to your question is the stigma is going to change. 10 years down the road, these are going to become major anchors. And if you were in an area where there's one now, as that area, as the stigma changes over the years, it's going to become an anchor point the same way maybe a private liquor store is now.
Right.
With time.
And is that, like, when you say that, because I think about the old pot shops where, somebody who's clearly the staff has been smoking dope all day and it's kind of grimy. You're saying since it's been legalized with the new standards, it's become more clinical?
No, I think landlords are, landlords want nice places, right?
Well, but also I think that's just the inevitable big business getting into the business, right?
And that's what it is. You mean it's not when it was illegal and people were opening them up as like compassion houses to get around business licensing.
Sure.
I mean, it's me and you that have an idea that we're going to go grow some pot and sell it. Like there's no business mind behind it. There's just no bankroll really behind it. And you could tell how successful or struggling a mall or a shopping center or something might be, because you would see like a vape store next to a pot shop. Because these guys would come in and literally get the landlord at their weakest point because they can't rent the space. They fine, you can have it. And I think when you're looking at the transition of what's happening, you're getting big business coming in. Like I know when we did the store there for the landlord on the City Cannabis side, I may have talked to the tenant once or twice, but he's an ex-Starbucks guy.
Yeah.
And from what I believe, he's an ex-Starbucks guy. And I know the agent in our office that did it, like they're talking extremely professional, like knows their numbers, knows, like it's not who you think they are.
What's a place near Broadway and Oak, like, Chris?
Secret.
No, but I was buying CBD oil there for my grandma, which actually I think is part of the cultural
I don't know if we want
shift.
to really disclose that grandma's on CBD.
No, but that's a cultural shift, right? You got 70 to 90-year-olds now.
It's a rotating door of 90-year-olds
realizing that
CBD.
that CBD oil is kind of a cure-all and it actually works. But that place was like a matchstick coffee shop.
Sure.
Like it was like, wow, this is
that's
hipper
what you look
than
at now too, right? Like these guys that are coming in with bankrolls to build these spaces. These are gorgeous retail shops.
Yeah.
They're not what you think where it's a couple guys eating Doritos that are high sitting behind sort of a glass pillar of pot. Like it's a completely different business model these guys are getting into, and it's big money.
So here's something that, and this just goes back to not even big weed as much as big liquor. And this is just something I'm just thinking about. But it's true, like when we were, we're not that old, but when I became of age to buy booze, like the motor
years ago.
39 years ago, the motor hotel is where you bought beer. It was like it
was also in Winnipeg, like you.
Okay, but it was
you were getting beat up.
It was but it was pretty grimy. But you're saying like liquor stores used to be frowned upon. Like what's changed there?
Well,
Why?
If you look at the licensing aspect, you go back. I'm just guessing 10 years, and pubs used to have off sales, right? After the pub, you'd roll in, you get yourself a 6-pack of beer from the bartender, and then they sort of created cold beer and wine stores. And then those cold beer and wine stores eventually got liquor licenses to sell distilled liquor in the cold beer and wine store. And then they actually separated the licenses and then allowed the liquor store not have to be paired up side by side with a pub. So you could eventually move that liquor store to a shopping center. And when that starts happening, the dollars completely change. You're not selling a 6-pack of beer from a bartender over a bar.
Yeah.
You're now selling liquor out of a 3,000 square foot store, and you're not doing $100,000 in sales. You're doing $6-7 million a year in sales in some of these stores, right? So, and I think the consumer wants a better product. Like you said, probably some people probably are intimidated to go in maybe some of the areas you don't want to be desired to go. But if you go into a nicer area and you make the store look nice, you'll probably attract everybody.
Right.
And I think when you look at like the pot business, they're sort of seeing how that happens. And that's why I think if we look at the trend of how liquor stores went from nobody ever wanted them to now every landlord wants to have them in an anchor position if they can find them.
Sure.
And you look at the liquor stores, they're becoming lifestyle brands. You're seeing BC liquor stores, and they target Save On Foods, they target Shoppers Drug Mart, they target London Drugs, and they're making it kind of a one-stop shop. You go to Ironwood in Stevenson Highway there, and you got a Save On next to a liquor store, next to a London Drugs.
You never have to leave.
Brands. Well, that's where I think down the road, pot may or may not sort of eventually end up the same way.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we got a question.
We do, yeah. We got a question from Ramey.
Secret.
If you're going to invest in property with a dispensary nearby, do you have to plan for a longer holding period?
That's a great
That's a good
question.
That's a good question.
How quickly does the culture change?
Well, I mean, I think if you go look at some of the stores now that are obviously there in some of the areas, like we talked about the Cambie corridor, just because that's an area that's got a lot of attractive tenants and builds going on. I mean that store does not look like a pot shop.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of it depends obviously on the kind of where the area currently is. I mean, if you're buying something in an area that's still gentrifying itself, it might be longer versus something that's newer. But if you get an area that's gentrifying itself, I mean, I think you can probably make a pretty safe bet that in the coming years that will probably be a pretty good staple on that block as everything else sort of comes around it.
My sense, and this is just my own thinking about it, is that the marijuana industry seems to be moving incredibly quickly, right? Like the opportunity, even in the last 3-4 years, the opportunities that have become pretty obvious to everyone. It's insane how fast that the idea of what that is, what it entails, who's using it is moving so quickly. That
I think it's also becoming like socially acceptable.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
And I think you mean probably now in some people's eyes, and maybe years ago, it was almost like frowned upon. And I think we've gone through this thing where it's become legal now, and our kids, it will just be second nature to them.
Sure.
When they're our age, they'll be like, oh yeah, there's been pot our whole lives, right? These pot shops are everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think the stigma will change with that, and I think that's going to play a big role in it. And I think down the road, I said there are going to be pretty good staples to bet on.
Right.
So if you guys do your intelligence report, the William Wright report, right? So you've done craft breweries.
Yeah.
You've done marijuana shops.
Just did one. It comes out in November.
So, like, what's the main thrust? Because your readership is people interested in commercial real estate and opportunities.
Well, I think too, we want to with the William Wright review, we try to make sure that we're putting some piece of education out there, and whether it be a project in an area, whether it be an area, like we just did one on Victoria that's going to talk about all the major driving industries of Victoria and vacancy rates and all of that stuff. The microbrew thing we did that on how that's sort of changing industrial areas and sort of building communities around it. And we did the one on marijuana, trying to give some level of education to people that are watching it of what, how it happens, what are the pros, what are the cons. Because there's a lot of things still that we haven't talked about in that business. I think BMO, might be the only bank that's kind of toyed in that marketplace. If you're a landlord and you got a mortgage with Van City, that tenant's not coming in.
Yeah.
So there's insurance things, there's financing things that you got to deal with as well, right? So that's where the video kind of tries to shed some light.
It's
on
also
how that
like
works.
if you're dealing with developers, and whether or not this is accurate, but you hear time and time again. It's funny. There's two things that I've thought about at pre-sale centers over the years. One was at Canvas, how the big draw of that was your 5 minutes walk to the Olympic Village liquor store. This was Renee's line all the time. Best liquor store in the city.
Legacy.
And I don't know if she that was important to her.
Might have been a Renee specific thing.
Yeah, it might have been.
That's a
it
good
might have been
draw, though.
important
It's
to
a
her.
good draw.
Yeah.
You're also like less than 5 minutes away from the SkyTrain station, right? Which is
Yeah, that wasn't mentioned. But but the other thing is that what's going to happen with the commercial space at the bottom?
Yeah.
Oh, the developer's going to hold that, and they're going to make sure that the tenants, there's not going to be a marijuana shop in there.
Yeah.
Like that's consistent. You hear that all the time.
you hear
right?
that. Yeah, you used to hear
And-
that all the time.
I'll tell you the trick to get around that.
What is the trick?
So
Heard here first on Vancouver Real Estate Live.
I think you'll find in slower markets when condos aren't selling maybe as fast, developers, the tenant mix below is either an asset or a liability in that development. And from a commercial buyer's side, to try to sometimes get that product is hard to get because a lot of developers like to hold it and maintain it because the rents go up. If the developer is still in the selling phase and they haven't sold out yet, how you kind of potentially get around it, sometimes they allow, sometimes they don't, is you give them the ability and the offer that you put a restricted covenant on title that we're not going to rent to the following industries for 5 years.
Right.
And they can register that on title. We have a client that is buying, I think, some phenomenal retail property in Victoria right now. Developer, I don't think is completely sold out yet, 200 to 250 units above. And we managed to get the developer, the concern they had with selling the product was a pot shop. showing
Yeah.
up or something to that effect. So we went through and we listed a whole bunch of things from methadone clinics and pot shops and maybe adult stores and stuff like that maybe you don't want. And we gave him the ability to register that on title for 5 years. So then he felt comfortable enough that we were going to rent to a business that would fit well in the tenant mix and be an asset for the building and not a liability.
Right.
In master plan communities, that must be huge, right? Where you have an
Totally.
extra phase to sell or phase
Yeah.
2, phase 3. You
Big
have to
time.
be so selective about who gets in.
And that's why
when it comes to
developers
leasing.
will try to hold on to them to get the tenant mix they want so it becomes an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Or they will sell to only owner-occupiers.
Right.
And the same kind of trick works with owner-occupiers in that situation. You just agree you're not gonna sell it to the wrong business or tenant it to the wrong property. Tenant.
Although by the time it runs out, you may want that pot shop by the sounds of things.
Well, after the 5-year mark, it falls off title, and at that point the developer's interest is gone.
Yeah.
Right. So they probably don't really care as much, but down the road, like I said, if it becomes a major anchor point, and these guys, their money on the rental side, they're paying usually over market rates, usually a lot over market rates sometimes, and you can count on the rent coming through most months.
What about, Ken, and maybe you can't talk to this, but I'm just wondering what, like, just even BC having a longer growing season maybe than other provinces throughout Canada, has it impacted like industrial farming? Like have you seen weed be a big?
Well, I read a
big draw?
report, and I want to say it was Remax, but I can't say for sure it was Remax. But I read a report that they were saying, based on the climate of Kelowna,
Right.
it almost has the best
The
climate
perfect for
in
Canada.
to grow pot. And I guess they talk about in the report, I believe they talk about how there's been several studies commissioned and stuff like that from the grow side of it.
Right.
That could be a surging industry that eventually maybe that becomes like the capital of pot production for Canada.
For Canada.
Right. So in that case, that's just another driving industry in Kelowna behind tech and tourism.
That seems
and
like a
all that stuff.
no-brainer, right? I mean, you think
Yeah.
about their growing, see how hot it gets in
California
Kelowna
of Canada.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's interesting as well. What else do we got? We should mention, Matt.
I was
'cause,
going to say, what
these
we
are-
got is the second community lager here. This is a phenomenal beer.
It's a light floral aroma with subtle malt notes.
Is that what it is?
And the thing is
Oh, we're drinking the same beer.
Are we? Well,
a
I
Munich-
I did have the pale ale, and the pale ale is delicious. Really nice cans as
I
well.
also
Are you guys related by chance?
Yeah, exactly.
That last one sounded so good. I almost debated about having a couple and joining you in the wheelbarrow.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a good beer.
For sure. So, anything else that we've talked a little bit about? And how are we doing on time, guys?
8 o'clock right now.
It's 8:00 right now.
Yeah, it's been about an hour.
It has been an hour. Well, we said we'd do an hour, so hey,
There
we
you go.
filled the time perfectly. So if there's no other questions, maybe we'll sign off for today. The first episode of Vancouver Real Estate Live.
First of many.
I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the
No
time,
worries, my
Corey.
pleasure, guys.
We got a lot of mics to work
This
around.
is I'll shake your hand
We'll do
off
it
there.
after.
We'll do it after. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in, and
Let's remind people to tune in for the next
oh yeah, thanks, Ramy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna be back probably in another 3 or 4 weeks, but we'll announce it on the podcast, Vancouver Real Estate Podcast. Find us on iTunes. Find us at VancouverRealEstatePodcast.com, and many more live events to come. So
Absolutely,
yeah, thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks to the bento box.
Yeah,
Live
yeah.
at the bento box.
Live at the Bento Box. Appreciate it. RamyFilms.com. RAMI Films.com. Thanks again.
All right.
Thanks, guys.